Thank you for coming out, and thank you, Azeb, for organizing all of this. And it's lovely and wonderful. And thank you for the opportunity for us to talk more about community-based learning. I want to start with a couple quotes. Maybe you've heard the well-known African proverb, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Or another well-known quote by Helen Keller, alone we can do little, together we can do much. These quotes to me speak about the value of community. And so my first question is, what is a community? A community is a group of people living in the same place or having a particular characteristic in common, a group that shares common interests, feelings, fellowship with one another, or a result of sharing common attitudes, interests, and goals. So we're going to start with looking at our agenda. I'm going to talk a bit about this building of community and partnerships between Romance Languages and the Center for Social Concerns. I think we can go to the next slide. For Romance Languages, creating a culture of community and partnership has been a way of doing things for us for some time. We find much benefit in partnering together and learning from one another. Fostering a community of scholars, learners, and thinkers and doers has proven useful, informative, meaningful, and a catalyst for innovation. In a sense, it's this culture of community that was the catalyst for deepening our relationship between the department and the Center for Social Concerns. But let me back up just a bit before we talk about that and give a little more light onto what is this culture or the way of doing things, at least for us in our department. In the department, we have an in-house committee, the Committee for the Study of Romance Languages and Literatures. And for over a decade now, we've established a protocol of working on undergraduate initiatives with curriculum assessment and innovation that crosses faculty lines, programs, units, institutions. And so the CSRLC, for short, is comprised of tenure-track faculty. We also have guest staff from the CNIB Center, and it's great to see Kevin with us. He's been with us on many adventures, but their staff is invaluable to us. The CNIB Center is our Center on Excellence in Teaching and Learning at Notre Dame. We also work a lot with the Center for the Study of Languages and Cultures and others, and for today's presentation, the Center for Social Concerns. So we've learned a lot about this value of building community, as I mentioned, that encourages and brings about change in meaningful and innovative ways. Overall, regardless of the project or initiative, our hope has been and continues to be to do these best practices together. And so whether it's across programs, across campuses, across town, we want to look at the spirit of collaboration as a community. It's in the spirit of community, collaboration, and best practices that we formally, in 2008, began to build more closely with the Center for Social Concerns. And you can go to the next slide. At that time, experiential learning was informally a part of our Spanish program, mainly at the intermediate level through extracurricular activities, some of which were faculty-led, and others were organized through student organizations and clubs. However, in the fall of 2008, a vision for a joint faculty position in Romance Languages in the center was presented. A small working committee of faculty and staff. We met regularly for over a year. Connie, myself, I see some familiar faces. I think Maricel was a part of that with us, and a few others. And so we met for a year. And in that year, we were asked to focus on 4 main areas. And we looked at and reported one, we were asked to collect and communicate types of frequency of experiential and community-based learning engagements related to Spanish. The findings clearly show that there was a need for and potential and more strategic approach to connecting experiential and community-based learning to our curriculum and in partnership with the CSC. 2, we were to become more informed about Spanish CBL nationally. We thought that was very important. So Connie attended some conferences, and that really helped us move things along. And even now, Rachel, Connie, and others continue to attend national conferences so we can stay informed and connected. 3, we were to draft a position description for something that didn't exist, and that was fun and a challenge. But it was for this joint faculty position at the lecture rank, which is a non-tenure track position. And 4th, to develop and facilitate ways for the Spanish faculty and the center staff to become better acquainted. Again, building this community, thinking about collaboration and partnership. As a result of that, a joint committee was formed and started in the fall of 2010 with members of Romance Languages and the CSC, and we do continue to meet regularly with Rachel's guidance. And also, we've been able to attend special events together. One of them is the event put on every spring by the CSC, the Faculty Institute, which is very valuable, and I've been appreciative of that opportunity. So the effort has been a collaboration from day one, and I hope you see that in our presentation today. So where are we at 9 years out? That's amazing to hear. 9 years. I keep looking at Maricel. Can you believe that? Connie, 9 years. It's beautiful. So what has been the impact on student learning and institutional change we're seeing from our efforts in building strong relationships across campus and across town? Well, we're here today because of many factors. 1, institutional support for a dedicated faculty position, equally positioned in the 2 units. This is key. I think this is a very important piece to the success that we're seeing, having an established director position. This position connects us. It connects us as faculty, it connects us on campuses to other campuses, it connects us to the community and the community to us. Like I said, the director position is a non-tenure track lecturer position. It does have a reduced teaching load. There's also office staff and student aides to help assist the position. I think this is really important to note. I don't know all of the interest those of you here, but thinking about, all the time and dedication that this really takes, we found this to be very helpful to have these additional supports to the position. The Cbl Director is the bridge. Our Cbl Director, Rachel, I think a lot of credit goes to her personally, and she's extremely well fitted for the position. She comes with excellent experience in language pedagogy, which is very important. She's very gifted at nurturing those community partnerships. So if I could say personally, I think where we're at today, a large part because of her leadership. And I would pause there and ask Connie if there's anything you would like to add. I want to give a lot of attention to this because if it weren't for the institution's support for the position, but also just the beauty that Rachel brings herself to all these endeavors.
No, I'll just add that this was equally a new position for the Center for Social Concerns, to have someone that was fully in our center, but also fully present. I mean, two 100% presences in 2 departments is tough to swing in, and Rachel did just an excellent job of fitting into the culture of the 2 units and being present for staff meetings and trainings and things, and making sure that communication happened across those 2 units. So I think we spent a lot of time as a committee laying the groundwork and building a relationship among the departments before we had the person in the position, and I think the position became successful in the person and in the care we took, I think, to set that up initially. So just validating what you're saying.
Okay, so it's my turn to talk a little bit about some of the specifics as far as the Spanish CBL. And Shauna started off by talking about community, and one of the things that has really been driven home for me this year through reading a couple of different books is that how essential community is in the way that we do work here. And obviously we're in a faith-based institution, and so that informs our mission, and it really gives a certain flavor to the way we do the work that we do. Including the kinds of things I'm going to talk about in community in a minute. But I also know that we can use the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we can use community organizing principles, there are other ways to do similar kinds of community building, even if you're not in a faith-based institution. But one of the books that really colored my thinking about this and helped me understand how the way that we do community-based learning here at the Center for Social Concerns has been colored by the Holy Cross charism or direction is a book that Father Don McNeil, who was the founding executive director of the center, co-edited with Margie File. And it looks at the organization, it looks at the impact that the CSC has had on graduates over the last decades. And Father Paul, in his afterword, Father Paul Coleman is the current executive director. He talks about, in the afterword, Father Don McNeil as the founder of CSC, as someone who believes a crucial theological task is to take personal experience seriously. And thus he has long invited students and colleagues, and perhaps most importantly at the Center for Social Concerns, to do the hard work of paying attention, letting experiences speak, plumbing the depths of memory and engagement with suffering for images and insights. And then Father Paul goes on to say how he has come to understand, as the executive director here, the value of education combining intimate encounters with human suffering, close attention to personal responses to it, and investigation of social causes for marginalization and critical theological reflection guided by the Catholic social tradition. So again, coming at this from the perspective of a Catholic university, but recognizing that there are ways to frame this as well if we're in a secular, or if you're in a secular institution, and also within our own department, not imposing a Catholic or a CST perspective, because people have academic freedom within their courses, and not everybody is going to use that particular lens to present the work. And then the CSC puts on a biennial conference, and last week the conference on Catholic social teachings or Catholic social traditions, one of the keynote speakers was Cardinal Luis Tagle from the Philippines. And I was just incredibly impressed with the way that he talked about the idea of accompaniment, which is a term that we use at the CSC, and the importance of walking alongside and understanding that our community partners are co-educators, are equal in value, are equal in expertise, that sense of reciprocity, and that we learn and gain so much from the people that we work with. And our students many times will say that they've learned much more than they've given. And I was so inspired, I had to buy his book that was at the conference, and it's called Easter People Living in Community. And what I want to share with you about that is, and this comes from Cardinal Tagler's book. So he's talking about what community is and how community is more than just a group of people. That for it to be a community, it's defined by the quality of presence among the members of the group, and that it's always a work in progress. Those of us who do CBL know that you can't just get things set up and everything's going to work perfectly. Every semester, there are things that come up. There are ways, just like with a family, we have to communicate. If we stop communicating, things start to break down. So it's the same way in the sense of building community. It's always a work in progress. And he goes on to cite Bernard Lonergan in terms of community and the idea of degrees of community. And Lonergan says that community is born when there's an achievement of common meaning. So in the work that we're doing, we're looking for common meaning for our students and for ourselves and for our community. That's the first degree of community, that we must have a common field of experience. And then the second degree of community is when we gain a common and complementary understanding. Reaching common understanding is made possible only by a process of dialogue, listening, self-emptying, for which not everyone was prepared. So people today have been talking about flexibility and humility and coming in and recognizing that we need to learn from one another. And then Tyler goes on to say that the next degree is when the community can move from common judgment to achieving common decisions, commitments, and actions. And so the research that's being done on sustainability, or the research that's being done in terms of the student learning outcomes with the DEAL model, the constructing of memory, that's coming to common actions, it's coming to common decisions and commitments. And all of this only happens when we communicate. So we know we've got to keep those lines of communication open. Oh, let me leave it on that for a minute. So the importance of community, we have a great sense of community, this collaboration, this working together that happens with the two departments, with Romance Languages and the CSC. You saw that this morning with the CBLC model that Annie was talking about with the community-based learning coordinators. Also between the partners that we have, we always try, Annie especially when she presents, but whenever possible we try to present with our community partners because we need to have the voices. I said to Michael this morning, I'm so excited you're here because having the student voice as a part of it is so essential. So that community building, not only between our two units, but between the campus and the community, and within the community-based learning classes and the joint committee that Shauna mentioned. We meet approximately once a month, and so we've got that good communication going between the two units. And then I try to do the same kind of thing when I'm working with the faculty and helping facilitate those partnerships between their classes and the community. I was really glad that Elena mentioned this. I didn't know that she was going to be using this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this power model. It's actually for doing community-based research, but I think it really informs the way that we do community-based learning as well. And if you'd like to know more about it, it actually is part of a book that Mary Beckman, who is the academic director, what is her official title? Just like with Annie this morning, I should know Mary's title. But she helps to oversee academic involvement here at the Center for Social Concerns. She and one of the community partners, Joyce Long, edited a volume on community-based research. And Jennifer Piggs' model is in there and explained very well. And I actually used it as a framework for our community-based research case study that one of my community-based learning classes did. So just again, emphasizing the importance of the partnerships, the objectives that we're looking at, objectives from the community partners perspective, as well as the learning outcomes for the class. We want to make sure that we're meeting both of those equally, working through things together, evaluating, reflecting, that communication going on before the semester starts, mid-semester check-ins, end of the semester, so just keeping that going. So the research, the conference today is relationships, research, and results. I wanted to think in that sense. So relationship, you've gotten a good sense, is super important for us, building that community. We also have, from the very beginning, tried to incorporate research into this. So we've been tracking community-based learning outcomes. We've been tracking the experiential learning outcomes. We wanted to make sure that we were using the research to inform how the classes are going, how we can improve them, how we can improve the community partnerships. We actually, are we in our going up for second renewal, so into our third year of an IRB protocol, because as Tatiana mentioned, she wanted to be able to present or be able to write on what she was doing. So even though in some senses this is a program evaluation, we wouldn't necessarily have to go through the steps of an IRB protocol. We wanted to be able to write and present on it, so we've gone through that process, which has given us a feedback loop. We make sure that we're tying things into the student learning outcomes, and it helps us with decision making. So how do we do it? We went through the IRB protocol. We wanted to make sure we were thinking rigorously about it. Michael Patton talks about how in qualitative research you need to use rigorous thinking, and that you can't necessarily set up a control model and experimental model and run the two classes and see how things go. So you need to look at things from different perspectives and different information points. And so this idea of triangulation, we wanted to make sure we had qualitative data, we wanted to make sure we had quantitative data, and look at things from various perspectives. And we also wanted to make sure we had all stakeholders represented. So we did focus groups and interviews with students. We also did it with community partners. Last year we did a survey of the faculty within our department to see how they were understanding what we were doing in terms of community-based learning. And we also have included reflections, as well as some standardized measures. I'm not going to talk about all of this. I will touch more on the tracking and the assessment, give you some of the responses from the students. I will mention a little bit the poster over there, but mostly I'm happy to talk about that. Shauna and I presented at the Coalition of Metropolitan and Urban Universities in DC in October, and that was a great way to kind of give an overview of the process, the timeline of how we done the work, especially over the last 7 years. The 2 years prior to my coming, of course, all the groundwork was laid. Other things that we've done, but I won't really go into, but most of it is included on the poster, is the senior exit surveys, the faculty survey, tying OPI scores to the students having done CBL. And we need to clean up some of the data from the last group and then add in, we only have one set of graduating seniors that we were able to run the correlation on. But interestingly enough, it's not, Brenda was talking about the not having a big enough power to be able to really do statistical significance, but the correlation for students doing CBL and the OPI scores was slightly stronger than those who had done study abroad, even if they had only done, it's not powerful enough to say this is a strong correlation, but it was slightly more for the CBL class than it was for the study abroad. Not to say, we all know that study abroad is super important, and we would never want to discourage students from doing the study abroad, but just the power, like John said, most of his language proficiency was gathered here in the States. And so looking for ways for students to have that reflective experience where they're really doing that integration of the learning. So EL, or Experiential Learning, and CBL, John was talking about that this morning. Experiential Learning can include a whole host of things. At the intermediate level, our students are required to do 4, 5, or 6 experiential learning experiences during the course of the semester. Next week is International Week. They can go to the movies, there are films for each of the 4 languages, or a concert. There are all kinds of things they can do on campus. But one of the things that they can do is to do community-based learning for that as an option. So in the intermediate level, we're talking 3rd, 4th, and 5th semester classes is where we're tracking this. Over the 6 academic years, that includes 243 sections, about 19% of the respondents, and we have about an 80% response rate, were choosing to do community-based learning. And they were, in those 6 years, they contributed over 8,000 hours of service to the South Bend community. At the intermediate level, those are courses like Tatiana's, Andrea's, you'll hear about tomorrow, classes where the CBL component is required and integrated. So through those 6 years, 13 sections, 175 students, over 2,300 hours. And then the advanced classes are all taught by Maricel, and she rotates through 4 different topics, I believe?
Yes.
Okay, 4 different topics, but each semester that she teaches, she always teaches a community-based learning class. So for those 6 years, a total of 23 classes, 958 students, and over 15,000 hours. We're averaging about 3,000 hours a year in the community for those students that we're tracking, and we're not tracking all of the upper level students if they're not in community-based learning class. So the year I started, Connie and Annie had worked with Maricel ahead of time. She taught the very first CBL class, my first semester on campus, and that year she offered the 2 classes. This year we were able to offer 6 classes, 3 at the intermediate level, all different topics. In the fall, I offered for the first time children's literature 300 level class, and Patty's going to talk a little bit about our partnership with that. And Maricel always offers 2. So, and in the fall, Elena, who talked about the Day of the Dead, she just got a Gainey grant to do a new course, and in the fall, she's going to do our second 300 level class, an introduction to translation, interpretation, theory, and practice. And she also, we're in the process of getting her community partner set up with a school that's going to be starting a dual immersion program in the fall. So let me just, again, kind of like Tatiana, don't take my word for it. Let's hear some of the voices of some of the students and faculty. So these quotes that I'm sharing with you have come from either student focus groups or interviews or focus groups with community partners. So, CBL. The CBL class was the first Spanish class I took at Notre Dame, and after taking that class, I decided I wanted to be a Spanish major. That makes us happy, right? Another student who was a male, and we do tend to have more female students in the CBL classes. That's also a demographic that happens with the CSE generally. The community-based learning showed me the utility of learning Spanish. Continuing to learn the language and understand the culture more opens up a population for you to interact with. Without that motivation from the CBL class, it would have been a little harder for me to continue doing Spanish had I been reading books and poems the entire time. Also from the students' focus groups, the CBL, from final reflection. So as a part of the IRB protocol, we got permission to collect the students' meta reflections at the end of the semester, and we went through coding. Shauna and Connie and I did lots of reading and looking at those. So an upper level class, this would have been one of Maricel's students reflecting on all the Cbl courses I've taken. I can honestly say that this experience of mutual learning has transformed how I live and interact with others. And if you talk to Maricel afterwards, she can tell you lots of stories of students who have actually changed career paths because of the experiences that they've had in her classes. An intermediate level student, this is an idea that comes up a lot. Furman mentioned this morning the idea of breaking the Furman bubble. We talk about the Notre Dame bubble here, other universities talk about their bubble. But the idea that it goes beyond the bubble. So in my opinion, when learning continues outside the walls of the classroom, it stays with us after the university. And this came from one of Tatiana's students. My experience outside of class conducting oral histories with an immigrant family has taught me the profound power of narration. And another student, the story can inspire change politically, socially, and mentally. So getting in the idea of advocacy that was brought up at one of the sessions. And then these came from a couple of the community partners focus groups. Professor M's CBL class is a quintessential definition of community-based learning. That's in and out of the classroom. It reinforces classroom teaching in a physical external location. We know exactly what they're studying. We get the syllabus. We know what books they're reading. We work with the professors on what the students' projects are going to be. So it's something that's beneficial for both. So that idea of mutuality and reciprocity. And that process happens every semester. So, we don't always you see some of the research briefs over there. Those were done for a number of years, but La Casa got to the point where that's really not a helpful project for us anymore. Let's figure out something else. And so that evolves over time. And another CBLC site who was not there this morning in healthcare. At the end of the semester, you always have those students that want to come back next year. Our retention rate at all of our sites is probably about 85%. And that 15% is probably more than anything graduating seniors. So this is referring to the system or branded clinic. Students that want to get into our pre-med, Spanish, double majors, they want to be there. They have to pretty much wait until somebody graduates and a spot opens up. And then they're in until they graduate. So, and I will turn it over to Connie.
Thanks, Rachel. Hello, I'm Connie Mick, and I am the Director of Community-Based Learning here at the Center for Social Concerns. I also co-direct a Poverty Studies Interdisciplinary Minor, so I teach in that program. But part of my job is to help other faculty members across the university do engaged learning, do engaged teaching, engaged research. And the partnership we've developed with Spanish is just an exemplar in terms of making sure that this pedagogy is shared, distributed, and expressed in units across the university. The Center for Social Concerns wants to do its own community-based teaching, but it also wants others to understand and practice that pedagogy in their own ways. And so the relationship we've developed with Spanish and in the position of the Director of Spanish Community-Based Learning is just what we'd like to do so much more of, create other little pockets of joint ownership and direction across the university if we could do that. So you've heard a little bit already about the research project that developed out of this relationship. I love that phrasing of relationships, research, and results. You saw that it was the relationship that helped get this off the ground, that made the research possible, helped us think together and think about what was unique and what we could learn from this partnership and what was happening with our students in such a special way. So you got to see some of the results then. Still ongoing, still working on it, but those preliminary results are really exciting. But it doesn't end there. It goes, I think, back to relationships again, right? Those relationships need to be nurtured and fed and need to grow. We need to keep talking and get that feedback loop going. So I'm talking a bit about next steps, which means not starting over, but going back to really deepen and develop those relationships that I think we started so well. So just some thoughts on how to do this for others who might we're hoping what this model is not only something we get to replicate here, but that might be something that would be replicable at other institutions. And that's why we want to share it with you today, because I think it's unique and successful. I hope you see from our partnership here. So some thoughts from the group really to deepen this and take this to the next steps are to build on the existing foundation at the institutional level. And folks from Spanish, and this year we'll have some folks from Italian here. So they come for 3 days in this very space, and we do a theory and practice, 3 days of really doing a deep dive into those things, spending half the day out into the community, meeting partners. Sam and La Casa de Amistad are one of our go-to sites that host us. Faculty get a taste of those different organizations. So that's something that's been successful. Some of the Spanish folks came 2 times. They came once and then they came in a different iteration just to deepen that experience. So that's something that the center can provide as a platform for that kind of ongoing deepening of knowledge about community engagement. So we'll continue to do that and invite others into that process. And frankly, Spanish now has this knowledge of how to do this well in Spanish and can provide that knowledge even within the department to other languages. So we're seeing that happen, and that's really exciting for us. We also offer out of the center course development grants. As you've heard, several folks in Spanish have earned those over the years. Some seed money to reward them for the time and the resources that are needed to do engaged work. We know it takes a lot of resources, financial and time-wise, and so we are able to reward them for doing that kind of work. And then also collaborating to bring in guest speakers. Annie Abbott and others have come along the way just to keep giving us a reason to get back together as a center and languages faculty to continue to deepen those conversations. On the departmental level, a lot's happening there to extend and solidify and clarify what's happening in the program. The section meeting meets to discuss the survey that we gave last spring. They're working on improving the articulation within the program and across the courses for consistency, and students have a sense of sequencing and moving through those courses in a deliberate way. You can see there on the slide the different courses that are offered now. And also we've been talking about exploring a Spanish community-based learning certificate, right? Again, some other way to sort of set some rails on, some sequencing on that learning process. What might that look like? Or thinking about things like digital badges that are popular in some places. We've looked at that. And several faculty members are using e-portfolios, which also help capture and tell the story, the narrative story of community-based learning in a really effective way. We also want to continue professional development among the faculty, so we've been fortunate to host on campus here the Consortium on Useful Assessment in Languages and Humanities Education. So we all did a presentation at that conference. We mentioned the Coalition of Urban and Metropolitan Universities. That was another presentation. It's been great. We've had different iterations of presenters from the center in Spanish, which has been really nice that we can kind of mix it up. And those presentations give us a reason to talk and to touch base and to make sure we're advancing our work as well. So that's exciting. The Faculty Institute, again, some of those folks come back as presenters and share their knowledge, which is fantastic. And of course, this conference, again, a chance to touch base and check in. Other ways we're trying to continue to move forward by deepening this relationship is just looking on the curricular level to refine the courses, to better direct students to map academic content to the community-based learning informed by the student learning outcomes, to maintain and deepen community partnerships. We have those community-based learning coordinator sites, which are our go-to partners, but we've also been able to develop and maybe to our surprise have some new sites on the horizon here as well, as some language immersion courses have come up into the local community. Those have actually provided a new opportunity for us to look at partners as well. Also trying to think about how to track community-based learning graduates. What happens longitudinally? How does this experience stick, this community-based learning experience? Do they continue to engage partners in the communities that they go on to engage wherever they move to? And from the center's perspective, we've got such an interesting cohort here that it would be interesting for us to compare this cohort to folks who are not part of Spanish? What's the difference for students who are not in such a well-supported kind of community-based learning experience and a different kind of major? Are they less likely to have that engagement or not? So there's a lot of opportunity, I think, for future research in that area. So what are the benefits in the long run, or what are we seeing at least here in this? It is a long run now, 9 years is a long run. So for Romance languages and literatures, we think evidence of specific learning outcomes, right? Our research shows that students are developing their linguistic and cultural acquisition in ways that we want to see happen. So that's exciting. For the CSC, this is a case study for us, a Scholarship of Teaching and Learning kind of case study that we think can inform other kinds of partnerships. So we've got our eyes on writing and rhetoric. There might be some other departments that would make for good partners that we could replicate this process with. And just mutually benefit in terms of sharing resources, right? To collaborate intellectually and financially on these different projects, to sort of animate each other, to take each other to different kinds of conferences, to share this work with different audiences than we would have if we were too siloed. So I think that's been a really great opportunity, and just the visibility that we have our marketing and our audience, and you all have yours, and we share what we do in both of those places. So I think that's been very beneficial. And I hope I'll let the community speak for itself here as representatives. So you'll hear from some more partners here. But generally, we think some of the benefits are that through Rachel's position there, through the development of predictable courses, our partners get fed some high-quality, sustainable relationships with students who are coming at regular intervals. I think that's important. It's not that unpredictable sort of cascading of student involvement, but it's much more predictable. They can see who's coming and what courses are being taught. They, of course, then have an opportunity to educate those students on their mission, and an opportunity really to give some feedback to the curriculum. When you're working with a professor over time, there gets to be, I think, some input from those community partners that can be incorporated into how assignments are developed, as Rachel mentioned, things, books that are read, assignments that are read, and there's much more opportunity, I think, for those partners to really get meaningful input, and of course to present together as well. And nationally, you're part of our national audience here, and international, for us to take this message farther. I mean, and maybe you can tell us what seems like it would work in your home institutions. We've found some of these best practices, and we're hoping that you can translate those to your home institutions in some way. So we see some of the institutional buy-in as a best practice, right? Again, that long process of us getting to know each other and getting to make sure that we were on the same page to develop this joint appointment, to then have an ongoing joint committee is a best practice, to have support time, to have course release, to have these surveys and this feedback and input on the whole process has been really critical. So, we want to share that with others. Also, this investment in the community partners, this ability to develop sustained relationships with the partners, create meaningful placements that further those student learning outcomes and address the community partners' needs, and also to help assess community impact while also assessing student impact. So where do we share this? We've got publication ideas as well. We're working on those, but at least doing the conference circuit for now, and making sure that message is out there and tested in various audiences. So we often talk about relationship building and community engagement field, about the professor and students building relationship with community partners, but I hope you hear from this part of the presentation this sense of building relationship interinstitutionally as well. When you can find this opportunity to collaborate with an organization like ours and in your discipline, it's been a really fruitful, I think, experience for us, and so we wanted to share that. Thank you.